It started with a sneer, small, sharp, the kind you only recognize as a wound once it's too late to flinch. Clara stood across from me in our kitchen, perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a crystal glass of lemon water, her eyes cold as January frost. Her lips, glossed to perfection, barely moved as she said it. "You're too poor to attend my family reunion." There wasn't a hint of irony in her voice. No humor. Just disdain, clean and clinical. I didn't answer at first. I simply stared at her, letting the silence stretch between us like a rubber band on the verge of snapping. The worst part? She didn't even look up. Just sipped from her glass, as if I were no more than a passing irritation. A coffee stain on an otherwise crisp, white life. Clara Whitmore. My wife. My beautiful, ambitious, calculating wife. In her world, image wasn't everything. It was the only thing. Her father, Harrison Whitmore, had been a senator. The kind who smiled wide for the cameras and made deals sharp enough to bleed. Her brothers, Elliot and Graham, ran hedge funds and treated market crashes like sporting events. Her mother, Joelle, was the type of woman who could eviscerate a server for forgetting lemon in her water and call it etiquette. And then there was me, Grayson Maddox, the quiet one. The wrong side of the tracks made flesh. In their eyes, I was the charity project Clara married during her rebellious phase. I had no Ivy League pedigree, no dinner club membership, no last name to cushion me. Just a weathered resume full of operational development, roles that sounded impressive but, to them, screamed blue-collar. They didn't know. Not really. And Clara, she never cared to ask. That was the part that settled deepest in my bones, not the insult, but the carelessness behind it. Like I was an accessory she outgrew. Disposable. Replaceable. But fate has a sense of humor. Because that morning, just 2 hours after Clara delivered her final verdict on my value, an envelope arrived in the mail. Heavy, glossy, silver-trimmed, an invitation to the Whitmore family reunion. 1 weekend of luxury and legacy at the Orem Palace Resort, with all its pretentious grandeur on full display. I stared at it, letting the weight of it rest in my palm. My name wasn't on the front. Clara hadn't even bothered to mention it to me. But I didn't need an invitation. Because the Orem Palace wasn't just some elite resort Clara had chosen to show off her status. It was mine. I leaned back in my chair, invitation still in hand, and allowed a slow smile to curl at the corner of my mouth. The kind of smile you wear when you've played the long game and the board is finally set. They thought I was the quiet husband. The one who nodded politely at dinners, who kept his comments soft and his ambition hidden. They didn't know about the late nights I spent building a dream brick by brick. About the sleepless years I poured into an idea no one believed in. About the business trips they mocked that were actually side acquisitions. About the teams I'd led, the empires I'd built, the risks I'd taken and won. Clara used to call my work beneath her station. She never asked about my progress. Never wondered what those long absences produced. And I never offered. Not out of shame, but out of strategy. Sometimes, silence is the sharpest blade. The Orem Palace had been my masterpiece. My crown jewel. A dream built on grit and elegance, on quiet strategy and unyielding precision. Every hallway, every chandelier, every detail had been signed off by me. It wasn't just another resort, it was a statement. A monument to every time someone said I wasn't enough. And now the Whitmores were going to walk into it, unaware, unguarded, and deeply overdue for a reckoning. I pulled out my phone and called Tarek, my operations chief. "Hey, boss," he answered immediately, his voice sharp and ready. "What's up?" I looked out the window, watching as Clara stepped into her luxury sedan, no doubt headed to some salon appointment to prepare for the grand affair. "Clara just insulted the wrong man," I said. Tarek chuckled. "That's a long list, but I assume she's moved to the top? She doesn't know Orem's mine. Neither does her family. But they're having their reunion here." There was a long pause. Then, laughter. "Oh, this is going to be fun." "Yes," I murmured, smiling to myself. "It is." I watched the invitation again, let my thumb trace the embossed crest of the Whitmore legacy. Legacy. That word they guarded so preciously, like it couldn't be rewritten. But it could. And it would. Because the uninvited husband wasn't just showing up. He was hosting. 15 years ago, I was nobody. At least, that's what the world saw. A kid with calloused hands, a worn-out toolbox, and a habit of staring too long at buildings, not for their grandeur, but for their potential. I spent most of my 20s hauling furniture out of apartments I couldn't afford to live in, patching drywall in luxury condos I'd never be invited into. and pouring sweat into tile floors that would end up walked on by men who wouldn't hold the door open for me. I never complained. Not once. Because I knew something none of them did. I was watching, learning, plotting. Every screw I drove in, every leak I fixed, every late shift I worked, I was gathering the pieces. I saw how the boutique hotels operated. I watched their clientele, memorized the way they branded their experiences, how they built a mood through lighting, linen textures, and discreet customer service. I studied the failure patterns too cheap corners cut, staff treated like afterthoughts, managers disconnected from the front lines. I was building my empire before anyone even knew I had blueprints. The Slade house was my beginning. I bought the land with 3 years' worth of saved tips, borrowed against my truck, and took a gamble that most people called delusional. The bank laughed at me. Clara, back then, rolled her eyes and called it a vanity project. I worked every inch of it with my own hands. Did the demo myself, negotiated every permit, painted walls until midnight, and trained staff at sunrise. I served coffee at the front desk wearing a fake name tag just to listen to how guests described the experience. I knew I wouldn't get another shot, so I made sure it worked. And it did. Slade House went viral quietly at first. A travel blogger mentioned it. A few celebrities passed through. Within a year, I had offers from investors. I turned them all down. People thought I was arrogant. I wasn't. I was cautious. I knew what came with strings. I didn't need their money. I needed control. Now, at 38, I sit at the helm of a hospitality empire most people assume belongs to some faceless trust fund baby. I've kept Maddox's legacy group behind a discreet curtain. No flashy CEO appearances, no exposés, no front-page photos. Just excellence, privacy, precision. 17 resorts, 3 continents, and my name attached to all of them only on paper. Orem Palace was the crown jewel. Everything I had learned, the elegance of European estate hotels, the tropical serenity of Balinese spa architecture, the tech-forward luxury of Scandinavian efficiency, I poured into this place. Floor-to-ceiling windows with sunset glass tint, heated marble floors, custom scent systems that shifted based on the time of day. Even the pins in the rooms were weighted, designed to make guests feel important the moment they scribbled a signature. It was mine, my masterpiece. And Clara? She never once asked about it. It still amazes me. How a woman so obsessed with status never noticed the growing silence between us. How she never asked why my suits changed, why our bank account never bounced, why I stopped using her father's connections and never needed to ask twice for anything. She was too busy judging me against her brothers, too eager to belittle me for not being part of her polished world. She didn't realize I was building my own. That's what made this next part so satisfying. When I saw the reservation come through for the Whitmore family reunion, it was almost poetic. They booked through a third-party concierge, the kind that handled high-net-worth client requests. It was processed like any other. No red flags. No personalized note. Just another event scheduled. But I noticed. The name Clara Whitmore Maddox danced across the top of the form like an insult and an invitation. She didn't even realize I might see it. I approved the booking myself. Then I called Tarek, my chief of operations, and Monique, the resort's manager. We're going to make a few subtle adjustments, I told them. We walked through every detail, the welcome signage, the catering selections, even the typeface used on the printed menus. Clara had requested a French fusion tasting menu. I replaced it with one crafted by my executive chef featuring curated dishes from every one of my resort locations, a tribute to the Maddox legacy. The name wouldn't appear until the night of the gala. Then came the final touch. I instructed the team to add a directive in the system. All final decisions must be cleared by the owner. Quietly, without alerting the guests. That meant any surprise, any complaint, any reaction, they'd come straight to me. And finally, I gave them the reveal cue. Updated signage to be unveiled at 7 p.m. on the evening of the Whitmore reunion, I said. Let them settle in first. Let them preen. Monique laughed. You want the shock value? No, I corrected, smiling as I tapped a knuckle on the marble table. I want the truth to show itself. And nothing reveals a person's truth faster than a little discomfort. They would come, dressed in arrogance and Dior. They'd toast to themselves, strut through my hallways, look down on the staff, and assume the world was theirs. All while standing in a kingdom they didn't realize belonged to the man they once dismissed as not enough. And when 7 o'clock struck, the curtain would rise. By the time the third cappuccino was set in front of me, I'd already mapped every detail, not just of the event, but of the fallout. I wasn't planning a reunion. I was curating a reckoning, one course at a time. I sat in the private office above the Orem Palace lobby, floor-to-ceiling glass framing a view of the cascading waterfall outside the main entrance. Tourists passed by taking selfies, unaware they were standing in the beating heart of a multi-million-dollar machine I had built from blueprints and bruises. Monique entered first, poised, professional, always 2 steps ahead. She had her tablet tucked beneath her arm, and that slight smile she wore when something complicated had just become easy. Behind her was Tarek, the man I trusted with every moving piece of this empire. Tall, sharply dressed, ex-military calm. My kind of guy. The final update has been pushed, Monique said, taking the seat across from me. Event listed under Whitmore Family Reunion, but all permissions are tied to the owner. And the signage? I asked, watching Tarek pull up the renderings. Still covered. Custom-branded panels over the digital boards, he said, handing me a sleek monitor tablet. Reveal is queued for 7 p.m. sharp. All timers are automated, but we'll be standing by in case you want the satisfaction of pressing the button yourself. I smiled, tapping the side of the screen. Clara had no idea what was coming. She thought she'd slipped in undetected, that this weekend was her latest performance of grandeur and grace. She didn't know that every chandelier she posed beneath, every flute of champagne she raised, every inch of velvet carpeting beneath her stilettos, was owned by the man she once told to stay out of important conversations. She had booked the venue through a high-end concierge company that catered to socialites and legacy families. Standard practice. That's how I designed it. I wanted Maddox's legacy properties to feel elite enough to attract old money, but private enough to avoid the public spotlight. Clara had no way of knowing she was walking right into my home base. Any pushback from her side? I asked, folding my arms. Not a whisper, Monique said with a shrug. She assumed, I think, that she was the biggest name on the guest list. That tracks, I murmured. Let's make sure that assumption stretches all the way through the first toast. We reviewed the plan again, every phase of the experience Clara's family would walk into. The welcome cocktails had been adjusted to feature a special edition of my own wine label, bottled in Tuscany and typically reserved for private clientele. Her family would sip it without knowing. The menus had been replaced with culinary nods to each property I owned, subtle hints of a legacy they didn't even recognize. Even the centerpieces were a play. Orchids flown in from my Bali resort, carved amber vases designed by the artist in residence at my Prague location, and embossed gold name cards with the Maddox crest, an abstract version, unrecognizable to most. But it would all come together the moment the signage dropped. And I would be standing right there when it happened. I want the staff tight-lipped, I said, leaning forward. Smiles. Service. No ego. If anyone asks who owns the place, they say it's confidential. Let the tension breathe. Tarek chuckled. You want the reveal to sting? No, I said. I wanted to teach. Because this wasn't just about me. This wasn't just a man scorned flexing for revenge. It was bigger than that. Every time I'd been laughed at for my ideas, every time someone mistook my silence for weakness, every moment I was overlooked for a handshake because I wasn't wearing a 5-figure suit, this was for that. And it was for the ones coming up behind me. The interns and line cooks and janitors who were building quietly like I had, stacking hours and saving dreams. I wasn't just correcting a misjudgment. I was rewriting the metric of worth. Clara would walk into her family's precious reunion thinking she'd outmaneuvered me. That I was somewhere back home, probably tinkering with spreadsheets or managing bookings like a glorified clerk. She didn't realize that every login, every approval code, every digital access badge at this resort funneled back to me. Tarek stood. We'll do a final systems check at 1600 hours. Staff is aligned. Security briefed. Anything else? Just one thing, I said, eyes fixed on the waterfall below. Let her have her moment. Let them all feel important. And then, Monique asked softly. I turned, smiling. And then we remind them who's hosting. I dismissed them with a nod, then leaned back in my chair. My fingers ran along the spine of the custom event binder Clara had created for the weekend. Page after page of itineraries, dress codes, signature cocktails, all designed to project status. And all of it approved by the man she said wasn't good enough. The suite setup wasn't just about theatrics. It was about timing, about letting people show you exactly who they are before you introduce them to who you've become. At 7 p.m., the curtains would part. But first, the Whitmores needed to walk into the palace like they owned it. Because the sweetest part of any reveal is the fall that follows. I stood behind the tinted glass of my private suite, 3 floors above the main entrance, sipping espresso from a matte black porcelain cup as the Whitmore convoy pulled in like royalty returning to their estate. Black sedans, sleek as panthers, rolled up one after the other, their polished frames catching the sunlight in dazzling flashes. The valet staff, trained to perfection, moved like clockwork, all smiles and subtle bows, completely unaware that the family stepping out was the same one who'd called their employer a kept man. The first car door opened. Clara emerged. Even after all these years, she had a flair for spectacle. She stepped out like she was stepping onto a red carpet, slow, deliberate, sure of her spotlight. Emerald green Dior hugged her like a tailored whisper, her sunglasses oversized, her lips painted a dark berry red that made her smirk look sharper than ever. I watched her scan the resort facade, one eyebrow raised like a queen inspecting her new palace. She didn't see me. That was fine. She would. Behind her came Bianca, Clara's younger sister, socialite by profession, human dagger by personality. She was already on her phone, likely live streaming or snapping filtered shots of the property for her followers. Then Joelle followed, matriarch of the Whitmore legacy, in a tailored cream pantsuit and pearls the size of jawbreakers. She had the presence of someone who'd once made a hotel manager cry because her room didn't face east. They moved like a unit, polished, icy, confident. "Showtime," I murmured, swirling the last of my espresso and turning slightly as Monique stepped into the room behind me. "They've checked in under the Whitmore block," she said, eyes on her tablet. "Staff's been briefed. Luggage is being sent to the suites as directed. Though let's just say there's been a few reallocations behind the scenes." "Good," I said, setting the cup down. "Let them get settled. Comfortable." "Bianca's already demanding an in-suite blowout appointment," Monique added with a grin. And Joelle asked why there wasn't champagne waiting in her room. "There is," I said. "It's just not her usual label. I replaced it with the reserve blend we produce from the vineyards in Tuscany. A personal touch." Monique raised a brow. "And when she finds out, she'll assume it was a mistake, until she sees the label on the signage later tonight." She gave a soft laugh. "I've got to admit, this is the most luxurious revenge plan I've ever been a part of." I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't enjoying it, but because it wasn't revenge. Not really. It was revelation. The culmination of years of silence, of being dismissed in rooms where I knew more than half the men talking. This wasn't about burning bridges. It was about making sure the ones I'd built didn't go unnoticed anymore. Another car rolled up. Clara's eldest brother, Graham, stepped out in a navy suit that looked like it had been tailored mid-flight. He shook hands with the general manager, oblivious to the fact that she reported directly to me. The man had the charm of a Wall Street shark, smile polished, handshake firm, eyes scanning every detail of the lobby like he was considering a hostile takeover. Then came Elliot, smug, tech-rich, always loud. He barked something at a bellhop who had the audacity to pause while lifting a bag that probably weighed more than him. I watched the kid flinch. Elliot didn't notice, or didn't care. I made a note. Every detail mattered. "Has Tarek secured the signage setup?" I asked, stepping closer to the glass. "Yes," Monique replied. "Everything's covered. Digital walls, printed banners, even the brass placards at the front entrance. All unveiled at 7 sharp. And the ballroom? Pristine. Lighting adjusted, music preset, menus confirmed. Your wine is chilled. The staff is rehearsed. We even added a few extra caviar bites, just to match their appetite for opulence." Outside, Clara was now taking a group photo with her sister and mother. Her hand rested lightly on Joelle's shoulder, smile wide, eyes calculating. It was probably going on social media with a caption like reunion vibes or family legacy weekend. I imagined her hashtags, hashtag Orem Elegance, hashtag Whitmore Wealth, hashtag Born to Shine. I almost laughed. Almost. "Do they suspect anything?" I asked. Monique shook her head. "Not a thing. To them, this is just another feather in Clara's hat. She's already told 3 different people that she fought hard to get this resort booked. Apparently, the wait list is brutal." I leaned forward and watched as Clara posed once more, this time with her hand on her hip, angling her body to show off both the curve of the gown and the grandeur of the entrance. She had no idea she was standing in front of a building she used to say I was too simple to dream of. Let them get comfortable. Let them bask. Because nothing shakes the ground beneath a person like realizing the foundation they've built their arrogance on isn't theirs at all. At 7 p.m., that ground would shift, and I'd be right there, waiting to welcome them to reality. The ballroom was dressed in opulence, every inch of it dripping with quiet extravagance. Crystal chandeliers floated like starlight above a sea of ivory linen, gold-rimmed glassware, and floral arrangements that smelled like wealth. The Whitmores had arrived in full force, all smiles and applause, bathing in the soft glow of their own self-importance. I watched them from the mezzanine level, out of sight, drink in hand. My custom-tailored suit, charcoal gray, discreet but sharp, fit like a second skin. No name tag. No need. I didn't belong to the staff tonight. I didn't belong to the guests either. I owned the damn palace. Clara stood near the grand floral centerpiece, surrounded by guests like a debutante holding court. She was telling a story, animated and graceful, laughing lightly at her own cleverness. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew the script. And it took weeks of back and forth with the concierge, she was probably saying. But I knew this resort was the perfect place. It's elite. Exclusive. The kind of venue our family deserves. A server leaned in discreetly to refill her champagne flute, and she gave a small, practiced smile, charming, but dismissive. Clara loved being the center of things. She had that Whitmore confidence, the kind you wear like a designer dress, stitched into your posture. I scanned the crowd. Bianca was boasting about the view from their suite, exaggerating how many square feet it had. Harrison, ever the polished politician, was in a corner with 3 former colleagues, recounting tales of legislative showdowns like he was still on the floor of the Senate. Joelle floated from group to group, praising the wine, critiquing the lighting. They were perfectly content, perfectly unaware. At 6:58 p.m., Tarek appeared at my side, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't speak, just gave me a slight nod. Showtime. I set my drink down, adjusted my cufflinks, and began to descend the staircase. My footsteps were measured, slow, letting the tension build as the music dipped, the lights adjusted, and the staff subtly retreated to the perimeter of the ballroom. Monique moved through the crowd with elegant purpose. She approached Clara like a diplomat, smile poised, tone just on the edge of formality. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "there's been an adjustment to your reservation." Clara blinked, caught mid-laugh. "I'm sorry." The owner requested a few changes. He preferred to deliver them in person. Clara's expression faltered. "I booked this venue," she said, voice rising a half-octave. "I have confirmation. I selected every detail." "Yes," Monique replied with a faint smile. "But as of this evening, final oversight falls to Mr. Maddox." Clara's brows knit. "Who?" That's when I stepped into view. The room shifted. It wasn't immediate. Not like a movie scene where the music cuts and everyone gasps. No, this was slower. More real. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations faltered, fragmented, fell silent. One by one, heads turned toward me as I approached the center of the room with calm precision. Clara saw me then. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in the same breath. "Grayson," she hissed, like saying my name aloud might summon a scandal. I didn't respond. I simply walked to the digital screen at the front of the ballroom, 40 feet wide, framed in gold, pulsing gently with ambient light, and tapped the screen. The display flickered once, twice, then reloaded. A single line appeared. Orem Palace Resort, owned and operated by Grayson Maddox, founder and CEO, Maddox Legacy Group. Then the logo unfolded, my crest, the mark I'd signed into contracts around the globe, etched in slate and silver. Gasps rippled through the air like dropped glass. Champagne flutes were lowered. Bianca dropped hers completely, the stem snapping as it hit the marble floor. Harrison's color drained. Joelle's lips parted, but no sound followed. Graham froze, mid-step. Clara didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stared, her whole body rigid, like she was trying to reboot a memory that wouldn't load. I turned to face them. "Welcome," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to reach every corner. "To my hotel." Silence clung to the walls like fog. No one knew how to respond. Some looked to Clara, others to Harrison, waiting for a cue. But there was none, because the show was over, and I had just flipped the script. I let the moment breathe, let the weight of it settle. I could feel every set of eyes on me. Not just watching, recalculating. People who had dismissed me as a footnote were now searching their memories for clues they'd missed, trying to reconcile the man in front of them with the one they thought they knew. Clara finally found her voice. This was a setup?" "No," I said coolly. "This was a reservation. You made it. I simply honored it." "You could have told me," she said, voice sharp, trembling under the surface. "You could have asked. I replied, stepping past her. Because tonight wasn't about explanations. It was about truth. And sometimes, the only way to deliver it is to make them live it. I stood still, letting the silence bloom like a firework that never quite faded. Every eye was locked on me. Every breath in that ballroom felt suspended, like even the air was uncertain of what should come next. Clara was the first to move, but it wasn't a graceful turn or a poised recovery. It was the sharp twitch of someone cornered, confused, and caught. She stepped toward me, one hand still clinging to the edge of the floral arrangement, the other clenching and unclenching at her side. "Grayson," she said again, like maybe if she said my name enough, the context would shift. "What is this?" "This," I said, turning slightly to gesture to the screen behind me, "is what you walked into when you thought you were walking over me." The room was a mosaic of disbelief. Harrison stood stiff, hands behind his back in a senator's posture, his face pale and unreadable. Bianca looked like she'd just been slapped with a headline. Joelle's expression was harder to read, part insulted, part intrigued, and maybe, buried deep in the tight pull of her lips, a sliver of grudging respect. Clara's jaw tensed. "You own this place?" "I do," I said plainly. "I built it. From the marble under your feet to the menu you bragged about curating. I approved your booking personally. Had to, given the irony." Her face darkened, her composure beginning to crack. "So this was a stunt? You let me book it just to what? Humiliate me?" I took a step closer, my voice quieter now, but no less sharp. "You once said I was too poor to attend your reunion. So I thought it fitting that you hosted in a space you assumed I couldn't even afford to step into." She glanced around as if hoping someone, anyone, would interject, would pull her out of this public unraveling. But no one came. Her family, her crowd, the carefully curated network of people who orbited her life, stood still. Because the power dynamic had shifted, and I hadn't needed to raise my voice to do it. Behind me, the massive digital wall continued its slow loop. Footage of the Orem Palace, pristine interiors, exotic locations, guest testimonials, all with the Maddox Legacy Group watermark in the corner. It wasn't gaudy. It wasn't aggressive. It was undeniable. I turned back toward the crowd, letting my eyes land on each of them in turn. To those of you just now learning my name, hi. I'm Grayson Maddox, husband to Clara, son-in-law to Harrison and Joelle, brother-in-law to the Whitmore Empire. I let the word settle. And the owner of this resort. A few murmurs broke the surface. One of Harrison's colleagues muttered something to another guest, probably trying to gauge if this was a well-planned prank or an elaborate social collapse. I didn't care. The truth didn't need their validation. I wasn't here for their acceptance. I was here to reclaim the space I'd been pushed out of. Silently. Systematically. Clara tried again, her voice quieter now. "You kept this from me?" "No," I said simply. "You just never asked. You were too busy deciding who deserved to sit at your table to realize I was building the damn dining hall." Bianca let out a soft Jesus and backed away, her heels clicking like cymbals across the marble floor. Graham glanced down at his phone, either looking for a distraction or trying to verify what had just unfolded. Elliot didn't say a word, his face red like someone doing math and failing to keep up. Joelle finally moved. She stepped forward, stopping beside Clara, and eyed me with a cool, calculated gaze. "So you set a trap?" "No," I said, my voice calm. "I opened a door. You chose not to see who held the key." Her lips twitched, not into a smile exactly, but something close to it. "Well," she said softly, "you've certainly made your point." "My point," I said, scanning the room one last time, "was never to gloat. It was to remind everyone that silence doesn't mean insignificance, that not all wealth shouts, and that some legacies are built quietly until it's time to speak." I gave them a slight nod and turned away. I didn't need applause. I didn't need gasps or even apologies. The reveal wasn't about vengeance. It was about alignment. I'd lived too long pretending I belonged at their table, but I'd built my own. And tonight, they were dining in it. As I walked back toward the mezzanine, the ballroom remained hushed. Whispers rose like mist behind me, heavy and hesitant. I passed Monique at the edge of the staircase. She looked at me, eyes lit with that quiet satisfaction only a long game perfectly played can bring. 7 o'clock on the dot, she said. I nodded. Right on schedule. I didn't need a spotlight. I had the silence. The kind of silence that hums beneath people's skin when they're forced to confront a truth they've spent years pretending didn't exist. Clara stood rooted in place, surrounded by the wreckage of her narrative. Her family was still stunned, blinking for the moment like a mirror they hadn't meant to walk into. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I descended the final step and walked toward her. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was precise. Clara's jaw clenched the closer I got. Her arms folded across her waist like a barricade. "You said I was too poor to attend," I began, voice low enough that only those in a 5-foot radius could hear. "But you're not attending, Clara." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "You're not attending," I repeated, then leaned in slightly. "You're checking in." She looked around, blinking fast. "What does that mean?" Behind her, Monique approached with a small, poised team of resort staff, each one holding a navy blue folder embossed with the Maddox Legacy Group crest. She moved with quiet command, like a conductor preparing the final movement of a symphony. She handed the first folder to Harrison, then passed the others to key guests: Joelle, Bianca, Graham, Elliot. One by one, they opened them, brows furrowing as the contents sank in. It was an invoice. Not just any invoice. The updated event statement, with a legacy adjustment fee of 30%. Harrison flipped through the packet like he was searching for a hidden clause that would save him. This has to be a mistake." "It's not," I said calmly. "That's the updated total. Venue usage, staff overtime, customized branding, exclusive wine selection, and a newly added 30% legacy adjustment fee for preferred families of influence." "Legacy adjustment?" Joelle repeated, sharply. "What kind of nonsense?" "The kind of nonsense," I cut in, "that turns insult into investment. Every cent of that fee will be donated to hospitality scholarship programs for underpaid resort staff and entry-level managers around the world." "Thought your legacy might finally mean something useful." There was a sharp gasp, a clatter of silverware on porcelain. No one moved to pick it up. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I simply looked Harrison in the eye, waiting. But the man who once commanded Senate hearings suddenly couldn't find his voice. Bianca finally cracked. "You can't charge us more just because you're trying to prove a point. This is extortion." "No," I said. "This is correction." Clara's voice broke through then, thin and trembling. "You did all of this just to punish us?" "Punish?" I echoed, giving a soft, hollow laugh. "No, Clara. I just wanted you to see where you've been standing. All these years, you've treated me like a passenger in your world. You never once asked how I spent my time, never wondered why I stopped trying to impress your father, never asked what I was building after the lights went out." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You didn't know," I said, "because you didn't care to know. That's the difference." I turned to Joelle. "You once told Clara that I had the sin of desperation, that men like me were for women with no better offers." She blinked, lips tight. "And Harrison," I continued, "you made me wait in the car outside your club's entrance because you didn't want your peers seeing your daughter's project, husband in denim." He had no words for me now. Good. Let the quiet do the work. The ballroom wasn't roaring anymore. It wasn't even murmuring. It was breathing, low and ragged, like every guest in that room realized they'd missed the moment the power shifted, and now they were standing on the wrong side of it. I gestured for Monique to continue with the distribution. "Please let the rest of the guests know that they may keep the folders. We believe in transparency here. And if any Whitmore finds the updated cost offensive, they're free to leave." Monique nodded once. "Understood." Clara stepped forward. "Grayson, please, can we talk?" That word, please, fell from her lips like it had never lived there before. Not for me. I looked at her, not cruelly, not coldly, just honestly. "You'll get the chance," I said. "But not here. Not like this." She stared at me, 1,000 questions behind her eyes, none of them strong enough to break the wall I'd built between us. Not out of revenge, but out of survival. I turned to the guests. "Dinner will be served in 15 minutes. No more speeches. No performances. Just food, wine, and reality." And with that, I walked away. Let them sit with it. Let them drink from glasses filled with truth. Let them chew on humility between bites of imported sea bass and saffron risotto. Because tonight, they weren't just guests. They were the lesson. It was poetic, really, how fast the Whitmore shine dulled when it no longer reflected power. One by one, they were escorted to their newly reassigned rooms, still too stunned to protest in full. Clara's eyes followed me as I walked ahead of her through the gold-trimmed corridors of Orem Palace, but she didn't say a word. She didn't argue, didn't fight. She was still trying to piece it all together, trying to find the version of me she thought she knew and wedge him into the man who now owned the ground she walked on. She failed. The suite she had originally requested, a sweeping, ocean-facing marvel with floor-to-ceiling views and private butler service, wasn't hers anymore. I'd reassigned it earlier that morning, not out of pettiness, but for precision. That suite now housed a couple celebrating their 25th anniversary, both teachers from the Bronx who had saved for 3 years to afford a weekend here. I upgraded them personally. Clara, on the other hand, was led down a side hallway and stopped at a modest queen suite near the kitchen service corridor. No view, no butler, just a clean, well-appointed room, quiet, functional, forgettable. The kind she once mocked me for scrubbing grout in during my early days. The look on her face when Monique opened the door for her, I'll never forget it. "Is this a joke?" Clara asked, stepping inside like the air itself was beneath her. "No," Monique said simply, her professional calm unwavering. "This is your assigned room for the weekend. If you'd like to request turn-down service, the housekeeping extension is listed on the desk." I requested the Grand Mariner Suite. "That request was not approved by the owner," Monique said, casting a quick glance in my direction. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Clara turned to me, her voice a whisper sharpened with venom. "You're punishing me." "No," I replied, stepping into the doorway but not entering. "I'm showing you the difference between earned comfort and assumed privilege." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. "I built this place," I continued, voice even. "Every tile, every cent, every piece of service protocol, crafted it all. You used to laugh at my late nights, called me obsessive. But you never once asked what I was building." "I thought you were trying to escape," she said quietly. I met her gaze without blinking. I was. With that, I turned away. Down the hall, her brother Elliot was busy interrogating a front desk associate about why his suite didn't have 2 bathrooms. His tone was arrogant, entitled, the same one I'd heard him use for years when talking to the help. I didn't interfere, not yet. I wanted to see how far he'd press before it dawned on him that the person he was berating worked for me. He finally spotted me. Elliot stalked over, all swagger and mock indignation, holding his phone up like a badge. "Did you sign off on this?" "They put me in some junior suite." "Where's the executive corner?" I took his phone from his hand, looked at the email chain, and then pulled a printed document from the inside of my jacket. It was a Forbes profile, me on the cover, standing at the balcony of Orem Palace, headline bold across the top. Self-made hospitality tycoon, Grayson Maddox on legacy, loyalty, and letting go. I handed it to him. He stared at the page, confused. "This is me," I said. "The man you once said didn't belong at your poker table because he didn't understand real investments." Color drained from his face. "And for the record," I added, "I turned down your fund's proposal 2 years ago. You were asking for equity in one of my African properties. I didn't think you had the range." "I still don't." I left him there, jaw tight, paper in hand. Correction wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity. People like the Whitmores weren't used to being told no. They floated on old money and inherited charm, never stopping to consider who was building the stages they performed on. I found Clara again later that evening. She was sitting in the garden courtyard alone, arms folded, expression blank. For a moment, she looked human, not glamorous, not weaponized. Just a woman who had finally realized the value of the man she left behind in her climb. She stood when she saw me approach. "I didn't know," she said. "I believe you." I should have asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes, you should have." She looked away, ashamed. I didn't enjoy her shame. I didn't want her to grovel. I only wanted her to see, not just what I had built, but what she had missed by refusing to look. "Tell me, Clara," I asked, my tone flat, "what was your favorite part of my worthless career? The global footprint? The presidential suite options? Or this ballroom?" She said nothing, but the silence was louder than any apology could have been. That night, the city glimmered beneath me like spilled gold, its light stretching out into the horizon, humming with life. I stood on the penthouse balcony of the Orem Palace, my balcony, watching the soft curves of the skyline rise and fall like a quiet symphony. The air was crisp, fragrant with the scent of ocean wind and fresh jasmine from the gardens below. It was the kind of view people spent their lives chasing. And yet, I wasn't admiring it for its beauty. I was watching it as a man who had once been told he'd never reach it. Inside, the penthouse lights were dimmed low. Smooth jazz played from hidden speakers, the kind of background sound that felt expensive without trying too hard. I had changed out of my suit, now in a soft black shirt, sleeves rolled up, collar loose. Comfortable. At ease. Not because I had won, but because I no longer needed to prove anything. The truth had already spoken for me. Monique entered with a tablet in hand, her heels soft against the polished floors. She gave a small nod, stepping beside me on the balcony, then handed me the evening's numbers: occupancy, guest satisfaction scores, invoice reports, bar tabs. A normal routine, business as usual. But there was an extra sheet tucked beneath the analytics, a transcript of the guest surveys being filled out by the Whitmore party. I flipped through them lazily. "Your wife's family is subdued," Monique said, with an amused glint in her eye. "I'm not surprised," I replied. "Humility isn't something they digest well, especially not when it's served cold." She laughed gently and then turned back toward the doors, understanding I wanted a few more minutes alone. As the doors clicked shut behind her, I let the silence reclaim the moment. The kind of silence I'd grown familiar with over the years. The quiet after long days. The quiet after hard choices. The quiet I learned to thrive in while the rest of the world looked for applause. I took a deep breath and let it all wash over me. The chaos of the day, the shock waves still rippling through the Whitmores, Clara's face when she realized the man she had belittled was the architect of the world she now stood in. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not entirely. It was closure. My phone buzzed against the table inside. I didn't rush to check it. I let it ring, blink, and settle before I finally stepped in and picked it up. Clara. Her name still stirred something in me. Not love, not anger. Something in between, a memory of who we used to be, and a glimpse of what we never really were. The message was short. "Can we talk?" No dramatics. No apology. Just that. I stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering above the keyboard. Then I typed my reply. "Sure. Breakfast is at 9. Corner table by the window. I own that cafe too." I hit send and tossed the phone onto the leather armchair beside me. It wasn't a power play. It was a reminder. I had spent too long dimming parts of myself to make others comfortable. Playing small so Clara wouldn't feel threatened, so her father wouldn't sneer, so her mother wouldn't whisper, so her brothers wouldn't snicker behind crystal glasses. They never saw me because they never cared to. Now they had no choice. And yet, I didn't need revenge. That wasn't what this was about. If I'd wanted to destroy them, I could have. If I wanted to see Harrison Whitmore bankrupt or Joelle humiliated in the press, I had the resources. But that would have made me like them. And I'd never wanted their table. I wanted to build one of my own. One where the staff was respected. One where excellence wasn't a mask for cruelty. One where a boy from nowhere could become something without needing anyone's permission. Outside, the lights of the resort twinkled like a living organism. I could see the reflection of the ballroom windows from where I stood, muted silhouettes of people still trying to make sense of the night. Some were likely scheming their exit. Others, perhaps, realizing the man they dismissed had made a quiet kind of history. I thought of Clara again, sitting in that small suite near the kitchen, the one she probably wouldn't even have stepped into a year ago. I imagined her there, hair pinned up, dress draped across a chair, staring at the ceiling and asking herself when the shift happened. When did the man she married slip through her fingers? When did her world stop orbiting the people she thought were stars and start revolving around the man she underestimated? I didn't know if we had anything left to say to each other, but I was willing to listen. Because sometimes, the view from the top isn't just about the height, it's about clarity. About seeing things you couldn't from the ground. And finally, I could see everything. Legacy. It's a strange word, one people use to make themselves feel larger, more permanent. The Whitmores loved that word. They wore it like a medal. Their legacy was in their bloodline, their wealth, their political ties, the family crest embroidered into everything from napkins to neckties. But me? I had no name handed down to me with reverence. No trust fund. No senator father to clear a path. What I had was different. Mine was built, earned, shaped in the quiet places where no one was watching. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the massive panes of glass that framed the cafe's corner table. The scent of roasted espresso beans and freshly baked pastries floated in the air, and the soft hum of conversation buzzed just beneath a mellow piano tune playing overhead. I sat with a cappuccino in front of me, no sugar, just the way I liked it. The cafe was mine, like the resort, like the land it stood on. I didn't name it after myself. I didn't need to. My signature was in every detail, from the arched window trims to the locally sourced marble counter. At exactly 9:01 a.m., Clara arrived. She looked different. Not in the way she dressed, she still wore designer, of course, but something in her posture had shifted. Her eyes searched the room more carefully. Her steps were slower, less certain. She spotted me and hesitated for a heartbeat, then approached. I gestured to the chair across from me. "You're on time." "I was already downstairs," she said, pulling out the seat. "Didn't sleep much." I didn't comment on that. Instead, I sipped my drink, watching her. She didn't immediately dive into questions. She didn't launch into defense. She looked out the window, took in the city waking up. "You built all this," she finally said. "Yes." "Without telling me." "You never asked." She winced, just a little, and nodded. "I know. That's what I keep coming back to. I keep replaying it all in my head, wondering when I stopped seeing you." "It wasn't an overnight thing," I said calmly. "It was a slow drift. You married a man you thought you could mold into something respectable by Whitmore standards. But when I didn't need to mold, you stopped looking." She opened her mouth, then shut it again. "You always seemed so quiet. I thought you were content being in the background." "I was," I replied, "because I was building something in the foreground." She exhaled, rubbing her palms together slowly. "It was never about love for you, was it?" I met her eyes, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability there, not the calculated charm she wore like lipstick, but real, raw uncertainty. "It was about love," I said. "But love without respect is a leash, and I refuse to wear one." Silence stretched between us, warm with the weight of honesty. She leaned forward, voice quieter. "So what happens now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "That's the honest answer. I don't hate you, Clara. I'm not here for revenge. But we can't pretend we're the same people who walked into that marriage. You wanted a partner you could show off. I wanted one who saw me even when I wasn't performing." She nodded slowly, biting her bottom lip, a habit she only had when she wasn't sure how to respond. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle. This weekend wasn't about humiliation. It was about truth. I needed to show all of you, that worth doesn't look the same on everyone. That legacy isn't inherited. It's built, one choice at a time. Clara folded her hands on the table. "And what will your legacy be?" I thought about it. The resorts. The teams I'd mentored. The properties I'd rescued. The young entrepreneurs I'd funded anonymously because I saw myself in their fire. "It'll be this," I said. "A life crafted deliberately. A name that meant nothing once, but now opens doors. And a lesson. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Then build something so complete, so undeniable, that one day, they walk into your world without even realizing you built the whole thing." She looked down, then back at me. "I'm sorry, Grayson." I believed her. And maybe that was enough. We didn't hug. We didn't plan our next steps. We simply sat there, two people who had once shared a future, now separated by a road paved in choices. When she left, I didn't watch her walk out. Instead, I looked around the cafe. A young couple was laughing over pancakes. A solo guest typed furiously into a laptop. A waiter joked with a tourist about how strong the coffee was. Life, moving forward. I picked up my phone and opened a new email draft. Subject: Maddox Legacy Scholarship Expansion, 2025 Initiative. Because legacy wasn't a name stitched into cufflinks. It was a seed you plant where no one expects it to bloom, and water with intention.